I'm your host, Henri Arslanian, and welcome to the Future Money Podcast. My goal with this podcast is very simple. It's to go deep in some of the biggest ideas, trends, and developments we are seeing in the field of crypto, and hopefully empower you with this information, and then let you make your own decision on what their impact can be on the future of money and the future of finance. To do this, I invite each week one of the leading figures of the global crypto community to have a one-on-one conversation amongst crypto aficionados and discuss some of these topics. My guest today is Sebastien Borget, the co-founder and COO of the Sandbox. One thing you may not know about Sebastien is that he's a big geek, as he calls it himself, but he loves to collect Japanese comic books. Believe it or not, he has more than 2,000. So next time you see him, you can definitely mention that and discuss his Japanese comic book collection. Sebastien, great to have you with us today on the Future of Money podcast.
Hi, Henri. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today and talk about some of the exciting opportunities in the Metaverse.
Well, Sebastien, we're definitely going to talk about the comic books as well towards the end. But before we go through that, as you know, the goal of this podcast is really to make sure that we can share and go in deep in some of the developments that we are seeing in the space. And of course, I want to talk about the Sandbox and what you guys are doing there. But before we get there, do you mind sharing with our audience some of your personal journey, your background, from where you were to where we are right now with the Sandbox?
Absolutely. Well, I've been an entrepreneur for 14 years now, together with my business partner, Action Madrid, which I joined in 2007. We co-founded 4 companies, always in space of new technologies. So the first company was involving peer-to-peer, already one of the first applications of decentralization, enabling video on demand, catch-up TV, sport events to save on their bandwidth cost through a BitTorrent plugin in the browser. Then we sold that company and to a CDN network. And in 2008, we started another one about allowing users to upload their photo, music, and other files in the cloud and stream them, create playlists with their friends, some sort of Spotify or Netflix before, the area before. We had dozens of thousands of subscribers paying $9.99 a month to access their content online. And in 2011, we co-founded our third company, Pixel, a mobile game studio, one of the pioneers in space of free-to-play and involving brands and IPs. We launched games where players could become makers, creators, make their own cities, their own adventures with characters involving Snoopy, Peanuts, Adam's Family, Wonder Park, Goosebumps, and a few others. And we launched as well the Sandbox on mobile as a 2D single-player game where users could just create a virtual world in pixel art with a touch of their finger on their screen and share those creation online. Progressively, we added more and more elements from the basic soil, water, mud, etc. to add game character, platforms, enemies, and it grew into a very large success, 40 million installs. Players were really engaged, creating 70 million creation that they shared. And that became our largest success then. The company was acquired in 2018 by Animoca Brands, which is a bigger game studio out of Hong Kong. And now I would say the largest company involved into the overall blockchain gaming ecosystem through various participation and projects that they are doing. I believe you had an interview with Yatsu already before to refer for your fans and listeners. And we've been, since 2018, working on a new version of Sandbox, this time involving blockchain and NFTs. And over the past 4 years, growing it into one of the leading decentralized metaverse. So for those of you who are not yet familiar about what the Sandbox is, it's actually a gaming virtual world where users, players, creators can actually make 3D assets, game experiences, and monetize them through the use of NFTs, which enable really true ownership of the digital asset they create or they earn through playing, and allow them in a permissionless manner to transfer it to other users, sell it, use it with our game maker, and monetize it into our virtual world, into our virtual lands map.
I will definitely going to come back to this. By the way, it's incredible that you were the same co-founder you mentioned for all these businesses. It's quite remarkable. This is a great story by itself. But let's focus on the Sandbox and let's dive directly in. So obviously you mentioned about how the Sandbox operates, but can you give us a bit more practical examples? It's obviously a lot of our listeners are familiar now with some of these, let's say, in-game, how the NFTs are being used in such like virtual worlds. But can you give us like a practical example of how the Sandbox operates?
Absolutely. So the Sandbox now is no longer just a game, it's actually a platform that incorporates several creation tools. VoxEdit, a 3D editor, modeler, and animation tool, which allows you to make your own assets in voxel. So it's easy, very versatile, accessible aesthetic that you can compare to some sort of digital Legos in a way. You upload those models to the marketplace, turning them into NFTs. From there, you can start selling them. Other users can acquire them and use them with our Game Maker, which is a third product on Sandbox platform. The Game Maker, which is really doesn't require any programming skill. So it's a no-code software that's very accessible and enables anyone without a background into like programming or video game making to make their own stories, adventure games, experience, etc. We also have a map composed of 464 parcels in total, which we sold about 60% as of today. So there will still be land available for purchase until the end of 2022. And on this map, something unique in Sandbox, each of the land is a digital space where users can publish their experience and monetize them or run them to your creators. You can put your own logo on top of it, which reinforces the feeling of this is truly mine. I own this parcel. And then you can acquire land, becoming the neighbor of one of the 165 plus IPs and brands that we've also involved into Sandbox. So we've been really, I think you mentioned it's a fun fact that I work with the same co-founder for some time. I think like it's all about like acquiring an expertise and how do you reuse it again the next time. So you save time and you reapply some of the key recipes of your success. And that's also what makes Sandbox today as a decentralized metaverse unique in its sense, like all our gaming experience that bring fun, that bring re-engagement, that bring mechanics that are more compelling to create interaction within virtual world. Our experience bringing IPs and brands. So now I mentioned 165 IPs, among which The Walking Dead, Snoop Dogg, Care Bear, Smurf, Atari, Square Enix, Deadmau, Richie many sport brands, and many more. We keep announcing more and more over time that enter the metaverse with us. So we help those brands with their strategy to bring NFTs and have a presence in the virtual world and enable creators to make their own stories, adventure, games, and you name it, all sorts of experience with those NFTs. And those brands allow their fans, their community to publish game and monetize them with the NFT from those IPs, which is something unique, never seen before on other platforms. And we think brings a lot of value and interest among their communities. The last part of Sandbox platform will be also like all the player side, I would say, and essentially play to earn. As we're about to open the main hub, the place where all users will come and socialize with each other, have like small activity, dance, emotes, etc., and introduce the first alpha season, which will be a first glimpse into like those systems we put in place with NFT gating and season reward pass to enable any landowner to launch their own play to earn season among their experience and interact with their fan, their community to deliver more value for them.
This is very, very exciting. And again, I want to go deep dive in some of these elements. And of course, I want to talk about some of these partnerships you've done with some of these brands, but maybe just for the benefit of our audience. So these assets are basically assets that the community is creating. And correct me if I'm wrong, but these are ERC 1155. And I want to ask you about that as well in a second. And of course, then there's a land, again, for the benefit of our users. These are ERC 721, which is kind of like NFT standards. But also, I think what is very unique there, Sebastien, is that they're literally piece of real estate. I think in the metaverse, There's like it's literally a piece of real estate that people are buying. And I'll come back about these. I want to ask you about the difference between how I wanted to go more in depth about the land element, but also can cover about the sand. Obviously, I know there's a sand token as well, which is in ERC20. And what is maybe quickly the role that the sand token plays in this ecosystem as well?
So let's start with assets. Assets, indeed, we believe in this vision of the metaverse where a lot of that content will be made by users themselves. It's user generated to populate all those experiences. And we provided the creation tool that facilitate that content creation. So we started our approach to designing a metaverse by the content first. We have been co-creating the ERC 1155 standard together with Engine and Horizon Games, because we felt that it was more suited for gaming, essentially. Because in games, you do not necessarily have always that this only each digital asset needs to be unique. If I take a sword, maybe you want to have like 10 copy, 100 copy, 1,000 copies. And what ERC 1155 standard does, it allows to still have a representation into a single token on the blockchain of multiple copies of a same asset. So you do not need to have like copy number 1, copy number 2, copy number 3, which then will make each one unique, but that you have 1,000 words and you know who owns. So it's a mixture of almost like a fungible currency coupled with a non-fungible token together.
So just on this point, Sebastien, so basically the big difference here is that in theory, we could do the NFT. We could have, let's say there's 1,000 swords, right? We can have 1,000 different NFTs. But what here is happening, we have kind of one NFT and basically 999 copies. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but 999 copies, but that we're able to trace who owns them, each one of them. But what would be the benefit? I'm just trying to, let's say, can you explain to our audience what would be the real upside? Why would a gaming company prefer ERC 1155, which is a copy, rather than ERC 721, which is kind of an NFT?
It goes back more to the technical side and some of the limitation of blockchain. Basically, we want to optimize for efficiency, and we felt like storing 1,000 copy strictly identical, each one to the other, to 1,000 token on the blockchain was not necessarily the most efficient manner to do that. It required like 1,000 minting transactions, 1,000 transfer afterward, difficult for more like bulk transfers as well, if you want to buy 10 or 100 at once, etc. So for efficiency, ERC 1155 standard has been really helpful to reduce the number of transactions on the blockchain, and it's been proven that typically in games, it's much more suited for that. And the proof is now we can mint in one transaction 100 of copies of same asset, and we can even have batch transfer, batch purchases of them, bundling of asset as part of reward. A lot of mechanics that exist in games, mostly free-to-play games, that now can be made possible while interacting efficiently on the blockchain. For lands, we didn't take that approach because each land parcel is really unique. There is no other land parcel with the same coordinate. There can only be one. So in that sense, there will never be more than 166, 464 lands in total by design on the smart contract. It's a square of 408 by 408. And as such, each land parcel can exist as an ERC 721. It could as an ERC 155, but technically, because, well, each one is unique, there's no specific saving here. So for the broader compatibility in the existing ecosystem, we chose 721.
So actually on this point, I think, which is very interesting, what I found in the sandbox is, let's talk about the land, and we'll come to the sand in a second, but let's say on the land element is basically, like you mentioned, there's about 160,000, let's say, plots of land. And I think what I found very interesting in Sandbox is these plots of land can also become, if you put a couple of them together, what you guys call a state, and then they can become a district, which literally, and there's, as you mentioned at the beginning, there's some piece of land that have a premium to them because they're closer to some of the big brands. And honestly, this is very, very similar to how the traditional real estate industry works. Have you guys been seeing, out of curiosity, any people buying land kind of as a virtual real estate play where they want to take it, they want to lend it out, they're looking at the yield it generates? Has that commercial angle started yet when it comes to land purchases?
Absolutely. And it should. It's part of like creating a system or almost an infrastructure in a way that enables an ecosystem to grow on top of it and offer new opportunities, new job, new potentially revenue for many. That's one of our intentions. So right now, I think we have more than 12,000 unique landowners in Sandbox, which makes us also the most decentralized by the number of unique token holders. And hence, for the future of the governance of that virtual world, since no one owns more than 1% of that map, feels like there's a good distribution of what the wealth of the map represents. That map today, the overall map, is worth $500 million in terms of like market cap if you take the average price per land, which has been already growing from $40 average to $2,400 on average based on demand and supply.
$500 million.
Yes, but we believe it will grow even more to 2 billion and more as creator will create value, will create wealth through all the experience like art gallery, museum, virtual concerts, games, restaurant, houses, etc. You can develop really anything you like, fashion show, architecture, happening, all of that into a virtual world. And it's really gathering to a whole digital economies with jobs. People are actually making a living already in Sandbox as digital architect, fashion designer, game designer, community manager, players, virtual real estate agent. To go to your question, yes, we are already seeing businesses and startup created, which are focused on being like virtual real estate agent to help as a broker to match supply and demand of those estates. And it's true that people value, even in virtual world, the importance of the neighborhood. What's happening in my neighborhood? Will it be cool? There's like a lot of diversity of experiences, like a sport brand, music brand, the gaming brand, etc. And that will translate into more traffic, avatars walking into those parcels. And as they cross to a border of one big brand, they enter your land as well, which normally gives you more exposure and more chance for selling your own NFTs and monetizing your own land. So all of that is very similar, shares a lot of elements with traditional real estate. Sometimes people refer to our world as like a virtual Manhattan, and I think it's a reasonably good comparison. And yes, like we're already seeing into the ecosystem, as you mentioned, like computing what's the yield that lands can generate. I think it's a very reasonable manner to approach this as like an investor, a tech savvy person as well. We're already seeing like virtual real estate funds like Republic Realm, just to name one, or even metaverse funds. Like there's the Metaverse Index Fund, which is like buying both a combination of lands into multiple decentralized virtual world and metaverse tokens, and proposing to investors who want to be exposed to the space without knowing where to buy which parcel and go deep into the detail, some package financial products that can be traded on exchange, etc. It's really interesting. And it goes further, like then we have DAOs who are acquiring land and will generate a yield based on like the performance and the revenue, almost like a rent generation from the exploitation of lands. This is really enabling key new business models, which I think makes sense totally.
You know, I find it also a bit ironic that in a decentralized economy where we are, ironic the centralized location of some of these pieces of land matters a lot. You know, it's a bit like you're creating a big mall where the foot space, you know, the foot traffic has a big impact. Can I ask you a question, Sebastien? I've been wondering for a long time. I think there's 166,400 something pieces of land. Why that number? Why? How come the number? Maybe it's a very geeky question.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a real answer to that.
There is some maths behind. I'll be honest. It was by design. To answer to your previous remark, actually something really interesting, and the community found it, not even ourselves, because we're on a blockchain, so all the data is transparent. There's been some analytics done on all the transaction, the value parcel, and you'll be surprised. Like the hottest point of the map are definitely not the center, but it's some specific corners where new communities, including like Borget, for example, have been establishing themselves. So there is a lot of like culture that comes into how you value and appreciate a parcel. Like no matter the brand you're close with or the communities you belong to, you want to be close by them into virtual worlds. rather than any kind of brand. And the way we've been designing the land sale for Sandbox, so we didn't sell out 100% of the map initially, and we didn't create a place where, like, the center is more important than the rest. So we are progressively unlocking new parcel either on the corner, the side, we're leaving space in the middle. So there will be opportunities for all those to generate interest for creators, for players, for landowners in future, as sometimes you buy a parcel and you don't know who will be your neighbor in 6 months. And maybe there's a major sport brand that comes, or major athlete, celebrity that comes, big IP, big gaming studio, and suddenly the parcel you chose will be attractive again. Again, I find it really amazing. To me, I take a snapshot of the map every month. It's a living world. It's a new nation in the making, in a way. Like, we're all contributing to building something new based on our interest and defining a new culture that more and more people of our generation start to understand. So it's really interesting.
That's fascinating. And I mean, to use your example of the Manhattan, right? It's like the Upper East Side where people will go, or the West Village, to be more in line with their community, right? And I think it's very, very interesting on that perspective. Sorry, I interrupted you, Sebastien.
No. To the last part of your question, why 166, 164? Like, we've been projecting over the next 5 years how many players we were expecting. Like, and our projection is we're aiming for 10 million to 100 million users, similar to Minecraft in a way. Like, they have 200 million users, Roblox is a 250 region. So, like, optimistic scenario, and you say how many games versus how many players, and that ratio is anywhere from 1 to 10%, which normally falls into like the ratio you will find on any user-generated content platform, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, etc., between creators and consumers.
That's super fascinating. By the way, before I want to go more in depth on the metaverse, what is your typical user? What is a typical user that is coming, playing in the metaverse, buying land, or playing some of these games, or even creating some of these games? Do you have some data on the typical user?
So but I can share you some metrics that's interesting. Today, we have more than 500,000 registered wallets on Sandbox. Half of them, they created their wallet for the first time. So they were not familiar with crypto before, they didn't own any cryptocurrency, any NFT. Sandbox is becoming the entry point for them to then fall into the rabbit hole of like the benefit of NFTs. But they come first for basically the fun, the games, the interaction with the brand, etc. The other half, they are really crypto. They are familiar with what an NFT is, and some of them, they are like crypto wealthy. They became millionaire and more through being early into Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. So you have both sides. What's interesting is among all landowners, they are really actively participating already to the digital economy in place by hiring creators, paying studios to build for their land. They do not have that skill by themselves, but they are looking for studios to build the experience that will populate their land. And they also understand like an empty land is not necessarily going to be generating a lot of revenue. So they need to produce content, experiences, and things that players will engage with. In terms of players, I can say we have zero because we haven't opened the player side. So all we have is creators. I'm really happy when I open our social media account. Every time there's always a new creation, something new creator that promotes what he's doing, which is a really healthy sign of like there's engagement and activity. Yeah. I was looking at our metric. We have more than 30,000 monthly active users using the Game Maker or VoxEdit. Spend 2 hours a day on average using the software. So it seems like there's also good traction there. Geographically, US is our number one country, followed right behind by Korea, Japan, and China. So actually, the world of Sandbox, the metaverse we propose, is also going to be a global one, a diverse one that's really diverse in terms of culture. And you can feel that culture just looking at the map and which are our partners. On one side, you have Zepeto, Pororo, which is like more Korean and Asian brands, together with Walking Dead, Atari, more Western brands. That's that's interesting. I don't, again, I have never seen any other virtual world or platform that combines such a global culture in one place. And that's really promising. Like me, back to the idea, I've been collecting Japanese comics. I had to wait those comics to be translated in French before I could buy them or find a Japanese store, which was not so common if you didn't grow in the capital, Paris, to get your hands on. So somehow I think like culture is getting global, and it's great to see it happening into our metaverse already.
So let's talk about the metaverse. I mean, from your perspective, how normal will be these metaverse communities, say in 5, 10, 20 years? Because obviously now we're still on the fringes, but you believe these metaverse communities will be normal and everybody will have their human physical life and they'll also have their metaverse life?
I think we're definitely heading toward it's the new normal. Like there's a whole culture in place. The pandemic has accelerated that adoption or reduced our friction to interact on screens already. We work, we have calls, we have social interaction just through phones and screens, but it's not fun enough. So now, like you have the possibility through just a 3D avatar that will become your virtual representation of yourself to play into those experiences and do all sorts of activities. Whether you're playing a game, you're competing with other players on a parkour, you're fighting against enemies and collecting loots and NFT as you win, or attending a virtual show, a virtual concert, an art gallery, a museum. All of that becomes possible in Sandbox through the creation tool we provide. And I don't see anyone complaining anymore. Going even further on that idea, it's so powerful that I think we're all contemplating the idea of like, I can spend time to socialize with other users. I can spend time to play with I can work now as well. And the last point is interesting because I believe NFTs as a store of value are also been enabling a whole digital economy of services. And that digital economy translates into new jobs. People can be paid to create content for virtual world, to become those architects, those game designers, level designers, to engage with other users as community managers, as hosts, as performers into those worlds. But going further as well to play into those virtual worlds, because as soon as you spend time and you collect resources that can be valuable, you can relate that, well, I earn revenue from spending a certain number of hours in doing fun things. Ultimately, this is a revenue stream that can be consistent. It's not a one-time thing. And if I did that 8 hours a day, actually, it could be my salary. And if it's my salary, it's my new job. So playing games in Metaverse is actually a job. And again, because it is decentralized in nature, we've seen in the ecosystem guilds start to shape up, and guilds of guilds with some companies like Guild Gaming, to just name the most known one, but there's hundreds of guilds existing with scholarships behind, and those guilds have been really interacting and engaging with play-to-earn games, farming, collecting resources, and turning out a revenue for the members of those guilds. And I would have never thought my culture have grown, and probably yourself as well. When you told your parents, I want to play video games as a job in the future, I think nobody would take us seriously. And yet we are now, millions of players are doing that. And it's not competitive game. It's not esport. Esport is only the best of the best can earn in a very competitive environment. Here, it's more casual, more accessible. Anyone can earn.
It's absolutely remarkable, from that perspective. I have to say, it really opens up your eyes on the whole. I remember as a kid, I used to play Nintendo and N64 and Super Mario, and it was a thing we would get punished if we were playing too much, right? Which I think brings me back to the question, Sebastien, we're actually running out of time, so we're going to try to wrap it up with one or two quick questions. I mean, obviously, a lot of big technological improvements over the last 20, 30 years had a big impact on gaming, even literally from the launch of mainstream computers, TV, the internet, cloud, and so on and so forth. What is, you think, the impact that NFTs, or even probably the growth of the metaverse will have on the gaming industry? Are we going to look back in 5-10 years and say they're going to be completely mainstream? And how do you think the impact they will have?
Well, I'm also the president of the Blockchain Game Alliance, and my role is to promote adoption of blockchain technology, such as NFTs, within the broader video game industry. I always wake up and I find to myself, how could have we been living in a world for 25 years of gaming where we actually never owned any of those digital assets that we spend a lot of time and money into them? Like, imagine if all the time, all the energy, all the different things I've been looting as a player actually could sell it, etc. Maybe today I will be sitting on a much more valuable amount of money in my bank account or my wallet than where I am, because I invested so much time, and it's productive time in a way. It brings value. It contributed to the success of the game. It generated revenue for the company that launched the game, but not for the user who are in. So I think within 2021 has been incredible in terms of acceleration of mindset and general awareness about NFTs. Within the next 3-5 years, let's say maybe 10 years, it will be totally generational. Like, kids already buy like digital asset and they prefer that to physical goods. Now they can value it, store it, sell it when they want. There's no way back when are you going to still play games where you need to pay for buying a virtual item that you do not own, or are you going to play a game where you actually get paid when you earn an item that you can sell? I think, again, there's no way back to that. Once you get accustomed to earning from something, better than free is getting paid at the end of the day. And the best way to retain, besides fun and engagement, is money. Like, you retain people in their work by giving them good salary, and the better the salary, and of course the environment is great, it's cool, the culture is cool, the better it is for keeping them into like being happy to work at your company and deliver more value. It's already been proven so much that people who get higher salary and better treatment thrive into their work environment. And I totally see that happening in metaverses. It's already happening. Like, people have their life totally transformed, becoming creators in Sandbox, launching their own company, starting to hire, when we at Sandbox have been supporting via our foundation all the risk, so they only have access to the upside. And I hope to keep growing an ecosystem with thousands, if not millions, of jobs for everyone, as I was quickly alluding, and supporting more and more game studios to take a step forward and decide, like, let's build on Sandbox and a platform where us and our players will own assets and earn a revenue from it, then go to the Roblox or App Store, etc., and give up 30% or 70% on Roblox of our revenue to platform that keeps treating us like the old way.
That's fascinating. And actually, Sebastien, as you know, I've been teaching fintech for many years in crypto at university. And at the beginning, the first class, when my students come in, I often ask them what's the most valuable asset they have. And often the answer I get is actually video game assets. But the irony is they don't even own it, as you mentioned. It's often skins or whatever they have in games. And that, I think that's where the rise of NFTs has been absolutely fascinating. Sebastien, in 1 minute, if you can just tell me, obviously there's a lot of controversies with some of these big video game houses around the world. Obviously, what was happening with the Apple Store, with the revenues going on, some of the conflicts they've had there. How has been the reaction of the large video game production houses when it comes to innovations like what Sandbox is doing?
Initially, I would say they've been dubitative, basically. Like, they didn't consider us as a serious container. They say, yes, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, maybe it's... And that's why the BGA was born, like, to create and show that the industry, the blockchain gaming industry as a whole, with now 250 members and growing, is building something solid. And over the past 4 years, we are now seeing more and more of those bigger game companies, Ubisoft, Gameloft, Atari, Square Enix, being already member, like taking a more serious look at what they can do with NFT, or even about to launch something with NFTs. But there's still so many other game companies that either are totally ignoring us, or now I get calls from all industry friends that have been working 10 years and say, it's incredible. I didn't believe you 4 years ago, and now I see I totally missed it. But no, you didn't miss it. Like, it's still a fantastic time to join right now and start to to accelerate the adoption curve. The sooner you join, the better. Like the overall other industry will move towards something that's more community driven and beneficial for your users. And because it's beneficial for your users and they earn more, guess what? They spend more as well. So it's beneficial for everyone.
It's actually similar to often what we hear with the fintech, with the banks, but also now in crypto with the entire financial industry, right? Where people coming to us. And one last question, Sebastien, then we're going to move on to the fire round question. Obviously, there's a lot of brands now, mainstream brands that you were mentioning at the start, who are now looking at putting their products into the metaverse. How is the first reaction when you go pitch to a big brand about this concept of the metaverse? What's the first reaction normally they have?
Well, it's been changing. 2021 has been really a transformational year for that. When we were pitching 2 years ago, they were, I don't understand. What is it? Explain us. And then they had to have several meetings to try to comprehend and build a strategy. Now, I think because of such acceleration in the space, they receive a lot of proposals from anywhere. So the matter has changed. The issue now is like, what should we do among all those things that all those companies are proposing us? And my advice to them and what we do is we explain, look, you need to have a long-term strategy. Do not see NFT as a short-term way to sell digital content with very little utility and hence very little value at the end for your fan and community, but look at how do you build a serious strategy. Consider NFT as a new medium that carries its own distribution and can be used across multiple dApps and services. And do it in a way like you're going to constantly bring value and things that your community and fans will be interested in over time. Don't think it's like opening a Facebook page or Twitter account, Instagram, etc., and just hoping like, oh, it's done. No, it requires a lot of active thinking, being creative, having teams to support that NFT strategy. So some of them now are creating NFT related jobs like NFT head of operation, NFT marketing, etc. And I'm happy to see that those minds are changing and some of the biggest brands will be entering the metaverse the right way and sometimes through Sandbox as well. So even better, obviously, and are starting to comprehending by having younger people into their company as well. And that's been really helpful for them.
That's really absolutely fascinating. Sebastien, I think what we need to do right now, we're going to do the quick fire round of questions. So I'm going to do quick questions. You need to give me 1 or 2 word answers on the spot, and we're going to make sure we stay quickly, go through them. Mm-hmm. Hope you're ready?
Yeah, okay.
You're originally from France. What is your favorite thing to do when you're back in France?
Drink good coffee.
Good coffee. I thought you were going to say wine, but here we go. Good coffee. Second question. You're a big Japanese comic book collector. What is your favorite comic series of all time?
I like Tsukasa Ojo as an author, and City Hunter is my favorite.
Wow, here we go. What is your hobby? What do you do when you're not working, let's say on your weekends, you're not at Sandbox? What do you do?
Spending time with family and going biking with them.
Wow, here we go. Good biking in Hong Kong. You're right. That's where you think you're based. What's your favorite video game character of all times and favorite video game of all times?
I spend a lot of time in Counter-Strike. No special character, just hours and hours of multiplayer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an answer we get a lot when it comes to video games. Counter-Strike, I think, had a whole generation of people that influence. What's your favorite YouTube channel or Netflix series?
I unfortunately do not have Netflix, but I love like Korean thriller movies and Hong Kong thriller movies.
Amazing. That's incredible. Incredible. What is your favorite thing to do in Hong Kong?
Eating food, dim sum.
Sebastien, if you could have lunch with one person, dead or alive, who would you have lunch with?
Well, Bill Gates.
Bill Gates, why is that?
Well, it's a person that I've been using his product for all my life, starting with Windows 95, and he's been himself, I think, a leader to follow in his action, in the way that he's had an impact in the world through his charity, etc. So it's a person I look up to. And
the last question, Sebastien Borget, the COO and co-founder of Sandbox is Sebastien. If you're not in the gaming industry or blockchain industry, what other industry would love to be in?
Well, always new tech for sure, or
That's it. Here we go. New technologies, always at the future forefront. Well, thank you, Sebastien. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Henri, and see you in the metaverse.
Good. Thank you very much to all the listeners. Hope this was as insightful and fun as it was for me. Again, if you like the content, make sure to click subscribe. If you like this podcast, a new episode will be released every other week. Also, make sure if you want to stay on top of the latest developments on crypto and the future of money, make sure to follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter, especially for my weekly crypto capsule show where I summarize some of the global crypto developments that you need to know in less than 60 seconds. And of course, don't forget to subscribe on LinkedIn to my weekly newsletter called The Future of Money, where I share the 3 big ideas on the future of money that you need to know each week. And also, I know many of you are trying to learn more about crypto, learn more about the future of money. Make sure you also check out my YouTube channel, where I have not only videos of previous interviews, and the one with Sebastien today will be on as well, but also a lot of other crypto related educational videos. And the good news now is all my video content is also available in French, Spanish, Arabic, and Chinese on my various YouTube channels. So thank you very much again for joining me today on this episode of the Future Money Podcast. Thank you very much, Sebastien, and see you all next time.